Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Baltany S3075B. This watch is available from Baltany.com for $195 which is €184. So firstly, let's look at the travel case that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the travel case comes protected by this outer cardboard box. It has a ribbon. You pull on the ribbon and withdraw the drawer from the sleeve. And I'll show you the PU leather travel case. Nice tan tone to the PU leather, embossed with Baltany. It has a strap which clips onto the brass rivet. And inside we also have this PU leather strip, and this goes between the bracelet and the clasp and the case back, and it prevents the clasp rubbing against the case back when the watch is in transit inside the travel case. So good presentation, and Baltany deserve credit because this is a low tier piece costing €184. They could have used the less expensive default option of just a cardboard watch box or a plastic watch box. I like to see a travel case used. You also get an envelope which is branded with Baltany in gilt, so nice presentation, and I'll show you what the envelope contains. So inside we have the warranty card, and on the reverse it has the contact email, support@baltany.com, if you need to make a warranty claim. Now I want to give due credit to Baltany here, because usually at the low tier price point of €184 one would expect a 12-month international warranty, but this piece, the S3075B, is covered by a 2-year international warranty, which is very good. And I also want to give them credit because they have stamps and also filled in the dates on the warranty card. Often it's the case with low-tier Chinese brands, the warranty cards are left blank. There's no dealer stamp and there's no date of purchase, and therefore the warranty card really is useless. But this is actually properly stamped by Baltany Watch Co Limited, and we have the date of purchase, and it does actually have a 2-year warranty which you can use by contacting support@baltany.com. It really is an example to other low-tier Chinese brands of how to get it correct. So you also get this owner's instruction manual which details the operation of the movement used, the Seiko NH38A automatic, clear concise diagrams, and the instructions are in English. And you also get this resealable plastic bag which has a Baltany branded spring bar tool. It has a push pin at one end and a 2-prong fork at the other, and a 1.2mm jeweler screwdriver used for resizing the screw pin links in the bracelet. Nice nail finish to the stainless steel tool, and I think it's good quality, so good to get these items included. And lastly, one also gets this Baltany branded microfiber polishing cloth. I always think it's a nice touch to get a branded microfiber polishing cloth irrespective of the price point of a piece. So good presentation and also good items with the watch. So the Baltany S3075B you're looking at is clearly an homage to the Rolex 5517 Milsub, very similar proportions to the 5517. We have a 39mm case diameter. Now the thing to note is the bezel overhangs the head of the piece by 1mm diameter. So we have a 39mm diameter case but a 40mm diameter bezel, so it overhangs the left and right hand flanks by 0.5mm each side. So although it's a 39, it does visually look and wear more like a 40, and that's something to bear in mind. We have a lug-to-lug measurement of 47.3, and we have a thickness of 13.8mm. The lug width is 20mm, and the oyster style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the 2-button push clasp. The clasp is signed to a good standard with the Baltany logo engraved. Nice firm resistance to the 2-button push triggers, which are mirror polished to a good standard, but I'm going to be critical of the clasp. It's made from a nice heavy gauge of 316L grade stainless steel, and it does have a beautiful luster. The brush satin finishing has a nice fine grained finish to it, and the brush satin finishing to the flanks is also done to a good standard. No sharp edges, doesn't have sharp corners, so the finishing is good. But I'm going to be critical of it only having 3 micro adjustment holes, which really is the minimum. 2 or 3 micro adjustment holes is the minimum and not enough. I would like to see Baltany lengthen the clasp and therefore add 5 or 6 holes in the flanks, because in the absence of half links in the oyster style bracelet, 3 micro adjustment holes just isn't enough to get the perfect fit. It only allows half a link of adjustment, and 5 to 6 really is optimum, and it's quite easy for Baltany to extend the clasp and therefore add 5 or 6 links, and therefore that would improve the quality. But I do like the firm resistance to the 2 spring-loaded triggers. And the interior is solid 316L grade stainless steel to the milled clasp, as one would expect, beautiful lustre to the brushed satin finishing. But however, they've made an embarrassing mistake. They've engraved stainless steel upside down. Now I'm just going to demonstrate why it's upside down. The majority of collectors wear watches on the left wrist, and when you take the watch off, you rotate the bracelet and clasp like this, and you press with your index finger and thumb the 2-button push clasp like so, and open it left to right, not right to left. And so the convention is to look at the clasp like this, and as you can see, stainless steel is now upside down. Collectors do not take off the watch like this and open the clasp left to right. They always open it right to left. So this is a really glaring, embarrassing mistake, and it's simple to correct. Baltany need to simply engrave stainless steel the correct way up, because it looks bad being upside down on the clasp, as you can see. So the other negative is it doesn't have any micro adjustment mechanism. There's no ratcheting mechanism, so we only have the 3 micro adjustments, and there's no diver's extension link. So therefore, really we've only got half a link of adjustment inside the clasp. Really they could do with updating the clasp and introducing a micro adjustment, or alternatively 5 or 6 holes, as I've discussed. So the dial and also the Milsub style sword hands are loomed with C3 Superluminova in a patina tone. Double dome boxed top hat crystal, as you can see, with clear AR coating on the underside. So it does a good job of being an homage to the 5517 Milsub, which used an acrylic boxed top hat crystal because it predated the use of sapphire crystals, and it does look very good. Proportions are nice, but the only negative is it does add significant thickness to the piece, and it is already a thick piece. If you look at the flanks to the case, you can see they have tall slab sides because this houses the NH38, which is a thick movement. So it's a tall, thick piece at 13.8, and that's something to note. It does wear very tall and top heavy. The other negative of using the NH38 is because it's a thick movement and it has a tall cannon pinion stack height for the hands, we need a deep rehort in order for the hands to clear the underside of the double domed boxed top hat style crystal. So it's a characteristic of using NH35As and NH38A movements. They do have a deep rehort, and I think that Baltany should consider changing the movement and use a Miyota caliber 9039, which has a low cannon pinion stack height, and therefore one can use a slimmer rehort and the crystal can sit closer to the dial, and therefore it reduces the thickness of the piece by 1 to 2 millimeters. They could easily reduce this down by 1 millimeter if they change the NH38A to a 9039. 120 click unidirectional bezel, nice finishing to it, no sharp edges to it, and we've got brushed satin finishing to the edges and also the top edge, and the scalloping is also well executed. There's no sharp teeth on the scallops, they're nicely deburred and chamfered, so they have done a good job of finishing the scalloped bezel, and it does look similar to a Rolex 5517 Milsub scalloped bezel. Aluminium bezel insert. Now, I personally would prefer to see a Milsub style bezel insert with the 60-minute ticks rather than just indexing the first quarter with the 15-minute ticks, because that is a Submariner bezel design, and I really think this is a Milsub homage. A 5517 homage really should have the full 60-minute ticks as per the Milsub. This is subjective. Some collectors will prefer a Submariner style bezel insert. Actually, the minute ticks are up to 20, usually on the Submariner it's up to 15, so they've clearly done that to make it different from Rolex rather than just cloning it, but I think that they really should have 60 minutes of ticks rather than just the first 20 of the bezel. So let's test the bezel execution. 120 click unidirectional bezel, as one would expect. Medium firm resistance, it feels very similar to a Seiko 5KX, which you might be familiar with. It's firmer resistance than a Pagani designed PD1661, which I like. Nice loud audible clicks. It feels even all the way through the 360 degrees of rotation. No lateral side-to-side play. No back play, so it feels good. Medium resistance without being too tight or too loose. And let's just check the alignment. The loom pip and triangle perfectly aligned with the 12 o'clock index and 60-minute tick on the chaptering. Now, with regards to the dial, I'm just going to move the minute hand out of the way so you can see it better. You can see that they have used a similar font to Rolex, which is Garamond font, which is serified, and that looks very good because it's high definition. The font isn't too thick, and often it's the case with Chinese brands. The font they use is too thick and the printing is blurry, it's not crisp and high definition, but the font they've used in Garamond is actually very good because it's sharp and high definition. But they've added a T in a circle at the 6 o'clock position, as per the 5517 Milsub, which this is an homage to. And I think Baltany have made a mistake with that because this watch doesn't use tritium, it clearly uses C3 superluminova. Now I appreciate it's an homage to the 5517 which did use tritium, and it did indeed have a T in a circle to denote this, but I think it's a step too far with copying the 5517. It should have an S in a circle to denote superluminova rather than a T to denote tritium, because it doesn't make sense saying the watch has tritium when in fact it doesn't. It has C3 superluminova. So quite easy to change. They simply exchange the T for an S and that would make it correct. So I would say that would be better deleted or alternatively changed to an S, but the quality of the printing on the dial is very good. The quality of the application of the C3 superluminova looks very good. It does look very similar to a 5517 Milsub, which had tritium printed on the dial rather than using applied indices. So, screw down crown, solid 316L grade stainless steel, coin edge finished, mirror polished domed cap. Finished to a good standard, no sharp edges, and it does have a nice chamfer, but it's sterile, it's unsigned. And I would like to see Baltany update this and either emboss or alternatively engrave a B for Baltany on the crown, because at this price point, €184, we are at the upper end of the low tier, €100 to €500, and I think that the crown really needs to be signed. It cannot be sterile at this price point. So it's a cost-cutting measure, and it's disappointing they haven't embossed or engraved a B for Baltany on the crown. But let's test the execution. It feels smooth, but it's not silky smooth. One can feel the friction of the internal thread of the stainless steel crown rubbing against the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. So it does unscrew smoothly, but it's not silky smooth. There is room for improvement with the tolerances of the machining and the quality control of the crown to make it better. They could make it more silky smooth. It's not actually as smooth as a Pagani designed PD1661, and that is a lower price point piece at circa €100. This is €184, so they should have a silky smooth crown at this price point. If Pagani Design can do it at below €100, there's no excuse for Baltany not doing it at €184. Now, there's only one click on the crown because this uses the NH38A, which is the no-date version of the 35A, and I want to give credit to Baltany because they have made the correct decision by using the 38A, which doesn't have a date complication. There's no date wheel beneath the dial, and therefore we do not have a phantom date setting position. So it just has one click, and as you can see, looking at the arrowhead second hand, it's now hacked the movement. So I like that it's just got one click, which hacks the movement, and we're now in the time setting position. There's no phantom date setting position. So it's good they didn't use the 35A, they used the 38. So it feels exactly the same as the 35A, which you'll all be familiar with. Nice light resistance to the gearing, minimal back play clockwise and anti-clockwise, and it feels solid. The resistance is good, and it feels medium resistance. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. You can see the arrowhead second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again. So let's test screwing the crown back down. So immediate thread pickup, there's a perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the crown tube. But it's a disappointment that this is 200 meters water resistance, because a screw down crown with two rubber O-ring gaskets, one inside the crown and one inside the crown tube, should be able to provide 300 meters of hermetic seal. This is only a 200 meter piece, but it does have a thick boxed top hat crystal, and we've also got a thick case back, so there's no reason why this shouldn't be 300 meters of water resistance, but it's only 200 despite being 13.8 thick. So it's a thick piece with a thick crystal and a thick case back, but only 200 meters of water resistance on the crown and case back is disappointing. So let's look at the case back. Solid 316L grade stainless steel, sterile as per the 5517 Milsub. It's got a nice flat profile to it rather than being a bubble back case back, and that is good. I can see they've made the case back thin in order to give minimal clearance around the rotor, and it's good because it's reduced the thickness of the piece down to 13.8, but I don't think 13.8 is slim enough. If this were 13.8 and 300 meters, one could be magnanimous about the thickness of it, but it's only 200 meters and therefore the case back could be made even thinner. They could reduce it by 1 millimeter to get it down to 12.8, and it does have concentric CNC lathe tool machining to it, which refracts the light, so very well finished. No sharp edges to the coin edge teeth, as you can see, and the mirror polishing to the circumference is done to a high standard, so it's well finished. It does feel smooth and comfortable against the wrist to wear the piece for long periods of time. I like the flat profile to it, but it just should be 12.8 millimeters. 13.8 with a boxed double domed top hat style crystal is too thick by 1 millimeter to be comfortable. The solid end links are a good tight fit to the head of the piece. They're well finished, no sharp edges, and we've got conventional spring bars, and it's good to see female pivoted end links used rather than male end links because that gives a better fit. So I'll give you a wrist shot. You can see I can easily slide 2 fingers underneath the braces and clasp, so this will easily fit up to a 9-inch wrist. So it's good. If you're a collector with a larger wrist, this will fit you no problem whatsoever. Plenty of links in the bracelet for collectors with a wrist over 8 inches. So as I've detailed, 39mm head of the piece, but it does have a bezel overhang. It's a 40mm bezel on a 39 head of the piece, so visually it looks and wears more like a 40 rather than a 39, and that's something to bear in mind. If you're a collector with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you may find the 40mm bezel gives too much wrist presence. The thing is, it does feel top heavy. It doesn't feel balanced on wrist, despite having a 20 to 16 taper, which is the correct taper for a 39mm head of the piece. The main problem with it is the thickness. The flanks are tall and slab-sided by 1 millimeter too thick, and although it does have a very flat case back, which I've shown you, the boxed double dome top hat style crystal does add 2 millimeters of thickness to the head of the piece, and it makes it 13.8. So it just looks and feels 1 millimeter too thick and tall on the wrist, with a slab sides to the flanks, as per a Tudor Black Bay, for example. So if this was using the Miyota 9039 and it was 12.8, it would be far more balanced, and it would look and feel better balanced because it just feels too thick and top heavy on wrist. Now the problem with the 13.8 is because it's nearly 14, it's going to be slightly more difficult to slip the piece underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. So 13mm really is the sweet spot for a 300 meter dive piece, but this is only 200 meters and it's still 13.8. It's just 1 millimeter too thick, as you can see. Just doesn't feel balanced despite the 20 to 16 taper, which is correct. The female pivoted end links are the correct choice, especially if you're a collector with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, because they pull the end link in the oyster style bracelet closer to the wrist. Had they used male end links, as per a Submariner, that would have extended the effective lug-to-lug measurement, which is 47.3. It's a rather compact lug-to-lug. 48 is the perfect lug-to-lug measurement, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. At 47.3 it is below the perfect 48, but it is close enough, so it does give a good compact lug-to-lug fit. But the female pivoted end links I want to show you because this is a negative of the bracelet. They've made the correct decision by not using male end links, but the problem is they kink. They're very stiff. The female pivoted end links don't articulate smoothly. They actually make a clicking sound because they tend to lock into position, as you can see. They kink, so you have to manually manipulate the end link to get it to sit where you want it to. And I'm just going to test the other side for comparison, because when I level criticism at a brand, I like to be consistent rather than being unfair or biased. But you can see it's now kinked. I have to manually move the end link, and it's very stiff. Now I appreciate they've tried to make the tolerances tight. They don't want a sloppy fit. They want the female pivoted end links not to have any excess play, longitudinal, lateral and up and side to side play, but it's just too tight, because if you look, the end link doesn't articulate smoothly as it should do, as per a Tudor Black Bay 58 with female pivoted end links. One has to physically move the end link into position, otherwise the bracelet just kinks and the end link in the oyster style bracelet sticks. So it's disappointing because we're not looking at a low tier piece below €100. This is €184 and stiff female pivoted end links that don't articulate smoothly just is unacceptable. This is a QC issue and it's very simple for Baltany to address because they simply machine the centre links or the end links to better tolerances to get a better fit, because it actually makes a clicking sound when you manipulate it. That's how tight it is. So disappointing because the bracelet kinks at the end. On a positive note, the brushed satin finishing is good. There's a beautiful lustre to the top side and underside to the oyster links, no sharp edges to the flanks, doesn't pull arm hair, and it doesn't rattle. So the bracelet is well finished. And the mirror polishing to the flanks is done very well, and I'm pleased to see screw pins used rather than the cost-cutting measure of push pins. So the bracelet itself articulates smoothly. The links aren't stiff, they don't kink. It really is just the female pivoted end links that kink on both sides of the head of the piece. So they need to get that correct. But with regards to the mill clasp, apart from the embarrassing engraving of stainless steel upside down, the 3 hinge pins are good. There's no excess play in the 3 pins. So they've got the tolerances correct on the 3 hinge pins in the solid mill clasp. So they just need to refine the female pivoted end links, and that would make it better. Right, so let's do a loom test and we'll see how the loom performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. So this uses C3 Patina Superluminova, which has a lovely peach tone, and there is a good colour tone match in daylight between the Milsub style sword hands and the printed indices. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed because we clearly have 5 to 6 layers of C3 Patina Superluminova on the Milsub style sword hands and also the loom pip and the printed indices. So good colour tone match. The green tone is the same on the loom pip, the dial and also the hands, and it's glowing very brightly. The exciter is glowing very brightly in the C3, nice green tone, which does look similar to tritium loom, which has developed a patina. So they've done a good job because the peach tone does replicate patina tritium loom from the 1970s as used on the 5517 Milsub, which this is an homage to. And in dark conditions, you can see that the green tone is glowing equally brightly on the dial, the loom pip and the hands, and it will continue to glow for a good length of time without fading. This clearly isn't 3 to 4 layers of production cost cutting. This is clearly 5 to 6 layers, which is optimum. So performance is strong. The benefit of using Milsub style sword hands rather than Mercedes hands is they allow for a large area, a large plot for the 5 to 6 layers of C3 to be applied. And you can see the benefit because one can clearly orientate the dial, but also if you look at the Milsub sword hour hand, you can tell the difference between the hour and minute hand clearly, and also the arrowhead tip to the sweeping second hand is clearly legible because we've also got 5 to 6 layers on the arrowhead tip. So excellent performance. They haven't cut any corners with regards to the quality of the C3 Patina Superluminova they're using. Right, so let's discuss the movement use because it's one of my favourite aspects of the piece. You'll all be familiar with the Seiko NH38A. So the NH38A is the No Date version of the 35A, which you'll all be familiar with. The architecture of the 38A is the same as the 35A. The only difference is they delete the date wheel and date complication, so there's only one click on the crown. It doesn't have a phantom date setting position as per the 35A. It's made in Malaysia and it's been in use since 2008. So at this stage in 2024, it's a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. The NH38A has 24 joules and it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. It has hand winding and hacking, which are useful, and also a 41-hour power reserve, which is perfectly acceptable. The stated accuracy of the 38A is -20 to +40 seconds per day, so rather wide accuracy range. However, I'm pleased to report that Baltany are well regulating the NH38As they're using. This one is running consistently at +6 seconds per day. So +6 is perfectly acceptable, and it's well within the -20 to +40 stated accuracy. So good, reliable, well proven movement. It's robust, accuracy is good, +6 is good enough, and 41 hours of power reserve. I like that it only has one click position, no phantom date setting position, so it's good. But the negative is it is a thick movement, and as you can see, we need to have a deep rehort in order to provide adequate clearance for the cannon pinion because it has a tall hand stack height. I would like to see Baltany upgrade to using the Miyota 9039, which is the no-date version of the 9015. That has a low cannon pinion hand stack height, and that would reduce the thickness of this piece from 13.8 down to 12.8 or even less. So disappointing thickness, 13.8 really is too tall and top heavy. Now, what do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet two criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So I'm going to declare this good quality and good value. I can't say it's excellent quality or excellent value because it does have some shortcomings. Things like the sterile crown, it needs to be signed with a B for Baltany, and also the clasp isn't long enough because we've only got 3 micro adjustment holes. We've also got some QC issues like the embarrassing stainless steel engraved upside down, which is a disappointment. And the main negative of the watch, which immediately needs to be addressed, is the female pivoted end links are stiff, they kink, they don't articulate smoothly. One could be magnanimous about that if this was below €100 in the low tier, but we're looking at €184 here. That's just not acceptable. And it really does spoil the otherwise good bracelet because the finishing to the bracelet is good, and it's just spoiled by these stiff kinking end links, which are really bad. So I can only say it's good. It does have good quality C3 Superluminova, and yes, the clear AR coating is good. Bezel execution is good, crown execution is smooth. So they've got the fundamentals correct, but the end links are incorrect, and also we've got the problem with the engraving on the internals of the clasp upside down, which is embarrassing. So room for improvement. I would like to see a V2 of this watch made with an update to the Miyota 9039 to reduce the thickness down to 12.8. 13.8 really is just too tall and top heavy. So I'm going to recommend it to you for consideration, but bear in mind the negatives of the piece. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Baltany S3075B. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.